Wonderful. All right. Welcome, everybody. It's the very beginning of the new year. It's January the 4th, 2023, 12 p.m. Eastern, more or less. And here we are back to the virtual office hours. So, in the beginning, I just wanted to highlight some points about the emotional release recipe, given that it's one of the main protocols that we use. And then, of course, we'll open the floor to conversations, sharings, questions, all of that. So module 4 is introduces you to the emotional release recipe. Okay, let me just open my notes here so I don't forget. And you probably know by now. Okay, the main rule of thumb is the basic recipe is used for traumatic events, while the emotional release recipe is when there's more emotions coming to the forefront. In the notes, I mention several categories of when the emotional release recipe is a good choice. I'll just go quickly through them. So, first of all, when the client is in an emotional state that is perhaps a little bit intense, where you feel like, okay, I might need to get them to a slightly better place before we even dig into something. The lecture notes say, okay, an emotion is hitting the client intensely during the session. I will say, though, that as you gain more and more experience, I guess your tolerance for what is emotionally intense for you will become better, in that you will know that, okay, they are in an emotionally intense place, but I can still go into the basic recipe with them. I don't need to do the emotional release recipe first to take the edge off. That comes with experience. But if you're perhaps not feeling comfortable in yourself, then okay, you would use the emotional release recipe to take the edge off. I see this a lot when you send me calls for our mentoring session. That the student, okay, the client sees the student sees that the client is getting a little bit worked up, so okay, they dive into the emotional release recipe, then that feels more comfortable for them. But that probably won't happen to you as you go along. You will be okay going just in the basic recipe. Now, the second option or a second case where the emotional release recipe is the better choice are those Gestalt memories. So memories that have some kind of common thread. And the common thread might be present in memories that technically are not related through any other aspect. So it doesn't have to be memories that have to do just with being abused by one of the parents or neglected by one of the parents or something like that. It can be memories that have to do with different people, but the common theme is there. And that common theme is often an emotion. So it might be that there are memories that are linked through the person feeling abandoned or the person feeling betrayed in all of them. Um, and the third one, of course, is traumatic events are not accessible for the client. That usually happens if it's memories from when they were younger, a child that doesn't quite remember what happened. Sometimes people just suppress memories, and that's why the details are not accessible. In fact, fairly soon, my goal is within the end of January, we will be adding a lot of new case studies done with our students coaching the clients. And one of the case studies, it's interesting. Charlene did that one. She had a client who she could describe the symptom, but she wasn't quite sure what that symptom was related to. So the symptom was every time somebody asked her, do you want to play cards or do you want to play a game of cards? That would send her into panic. She would tear up. She would have the classic traumatic avoidance of, for example, when she was going um, to visit friends, or when they had friends over, she would do everything to avoid even being put in a situation of being asked if she wanted to play a game of cards. If she was asked that, then she would just find an excuse and just run away from there. And in that session, as you will see, the client cannot quite recall where this started. The only thing she is able to say that, okay, maybe this has to do with that, is that when she was little, her parents used to have people over, neighbors and friends, and they would play games of cards. And that sometimes she would sit on her uncle's lap, and she doesn't remember anything specific. She just had, she called it that. She has a gut feeling or something like that, that maybe the uncle was perhaps touching her inappropriately, something like that. So the practitioner, Charlene, didn't have any specific event to hold on to and take her into the basic recipe. So of course, the emotional release recipe would be the good place to go with. And in that case, and what Charlene did perfectly in that session was ask her to assess the SUD level. Okay, how much emotional intensity do you feel if somebody asks you, would you like to play a game of cards? And that was, of course, a lot. And then it was pretty much maybe half an hour of the emotional recipe, something like that. Charlene then added a couple of rounds of basic recipe towards the end, just to put her in a nice grounded place. And towards the end, testing the proof in the pudding, we would see, okay, if somebody asks you, would you like to play a game of cards, which before this session, just the words would make her tear up in panic, nothing. And of course, the client was also able to actually play cards after that session. So that would be a good example of when that emotional release recipe was a very good choice, even though actually that was the first session, which normally, if we can, we try to do the basic recipe there or a combination. So I do want to say that it might look on the surface that it's separate, like there's either events or emotions, but really behind all those traumatic emotions, there's always events. It's just sometimes we cannot see them, or the client cannot access them. So we're really going after the same thing, just through a slightly different, from a slightly different angle. We are indirectly really clearing events, even with the emotional release recipe. What I guess bears repeating with the emotional release recipe is that something to remind the client of is that we don't want them to force things. Again, they've never done this before in most cases, so they don't know how to work their way through the emotional release recipe. It's new to them. It's like nothing else that they've tried, probably. So there are some things that you might want to remind them of, such as hi Taryn, I'm just going to mute your line a little bit, or
I
mute
don't see
yourself.
myself.
Yeah, okay. Let me just look at you and mute you. Okay, there's Taryn muted. Wonderful. So back to what to remember with the emotional release recipe. You can tell them, you don't force things. We are not after nor negative nor positive emotions. Just see what comes up. I love to say, let the emotion find you. And I guess the trick with that is also trying to be as neutral as you can as you walk them through that emotional release recipe. So if they find a quote unquote negative emotion, then you're neutral. Okay, what else are you finding? Where is that grief? Where is that fury? And the same thing when they find something positive, you don't have to pop a bottle of champagne because they finally, after many waves, there's something positive, just so they don't think that you're hinting that that's what they should be feeling. So neutrality, and then of course, now you know it because you've done the emotional release recipe, but what is new to most people and what we're actually trying to teach them is that the emotions really change quickly. So they don't know that the grief can be there for a couple of seconds, or that even things like anger, fury, that it will go away. So just let them know that that's normal, that the waves are to be expected as well. Um, I guess another thing to tell you is that, well, for those of you who have tried, you will see that most clients will tend to have a preference for one or the other. Some people just love the basic recipe, while some others just love the emotional release recipe. That's absolutely fine. Just work with whatever they're most inclined to do, or what they love to do. And when it comes to, I guess, troubleshooting or something also to be aware for you as a practitioner. So, one of the great things about the emotional release recipe, and a great gift for the client, is that you give them the gift of sitting through their very intense emotions. Now, this is something that is often difficult even for therapists or counselors. When the client gets distressed, oftentimes, and I think this really comes down to not always, all of the practitioners, therapists having a reliable tool to actually help the client right then and there. Uh, it can become distressing even for the practitioner, and the client feels and senses that the practitioner has difficulty sitting with them through those difficult emotions. And the great thing about this is that if you have done this on yourself or a couple of clients, you will know that the intensity is there and that it will pass. With some clients that are very responsive, it takes minutes. With others, and you have plenty of case studies to learn from, it might be half an hour, or a little bit more, but eventually nobody stays in that very agitated state. So expect that. I guess before I've seen something similar being done by another practitioner. It was a training that I took at a point, and it was a different modality. Doesn't matter, but it was that bodily learning of seeing someone working with a person who was very agitated, even having reactions. So learn from those sessions. Look at how, when you just sit through it and continue doing what the instructions of the protocols tell you to do, eventually they'll be able to not stay that agitated. Another thing that I wanted to remind you of is that you will have clients who are more aware of their emotions and less aware. And sometimes it might be a bit tempting to think that if somebody is relatively self-aware, in that they can name what they're feeling and you see it on their face and their body, it's the same thing, they don't need that much help from you, that they will not need your input so much. However, even a person who is self-aware, say Becky was rather self-aware of her emotional reality, and what was the root cause of her symptoms, etc. But when it came to actually naming the emotions, her Broca's area, the speech production area of her brain, was just as turned off as anybody's Broca's area when they're traumatized. So she was way off when she was doing the emotional release recipe, and you have that in your case study guide. You might remember her very clenched jaw and the teeth exposed like an animal in a bit of a defensive rage. And she genuinely thought it was sadness. And then later on, I could see disgust in her face, but she had no clue. She couldn't name the feeling. So just like less self-aware clients, even the ones that are more self-aware might need your help during the emotional release recipe. So don't be kind of shy to interfere a little bit. Also, the emotional release recipe. It can be very intense the first time somebody does it, perhaps even the second time, but it rarely is intense on every occasion. It's like the body learns what's that about, and then the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, etc. it just takes you way less time, or the client, it takes them way less time to get to where you want them to be, in that, the negative emotions are released and they feel much, much better. Of course, I will state the obvious. Patience is something that you want to cultivate in all of this work, but definitely with the emotional release recipe. And I guess it's more understanding that it's just the waves. If say the client reaches a positive emotion and then another wave of negative emotions come, if you don't make it personal, if you understand that that's just the way it goes with some people, then I guess that's the right mindset, and that will help you with that patience. And the final point before we open the floor to you is this theme of naming emotions and putting words around somebody's emotional reality is something that is at the center of almost all of our protocols and interventions. So we see it very clearly with the emotional release recipe. Okay, what are you feeling? Where is it? Okay, this anxiety in my stomach. But the same principle is applied in for example, the therapeutic letter. It's all about naming. The same principle is applied when you think of transitions. The ending stage, one of the central interventions is simply being able to name the loss. And I'm highlighting this because in my experience in the past, I guess sometimes students thought that that just talking about the loss is not a proper intervention, that there has to be some kind of another exercise that is more actionable. But what I'm trying to say is, in most of these protocols, the naming is really central. And if they are at the ending stage, if you are sensing, okay, this is a transition that's coming and that they need to step into, just having the conversation around, what have you lost? What exactly are we grieving here? What is that sense of loss related to? Relationships, homes, career, opportunities, etc. That in and of itself is the intervention. And actually, you know that it's an intervention because once you've done this, what is a natural way that usually clients feel is that there will be a little bit of a sense of excitement starts to emerge from the sense of, okay, I just want to be done with this. They will often say, I just want to be free. I just want to be done with this. And it's at that point, if you want to give an assignment, that would be that closure assignment, some kind of closing ritual, burning letters, digging graves, what have you. But that naming of the loss is a very central intervention there. So there's that naming, that verbalizing of emotional reality, just like in the emotional release recipe. Then I mentioned the therapeutic letter again. So the reason why I do this with Jeannie in the session there is that so she understands that we're naming all of these emotions, and there are other prompts, so you don't have to think about that. Just download the therapeutic letter and you can go through it with them, just like I do in the session. Now, the same principle repeats itself in the name and protect element. So if the threat is still out there, and the SUD doesn't go all the way down, it's interesting how a lot of struggles of human beings come from not having emotional clarity, not having enough clarity as to what it is that they're experiencing, and making it more concrete. That the whole therapy is based on helping the client get some more clarity as to what's going on for them. And with the name and protect, you see that oftentimes they don't have a clue as to what it is that they still perceive as a threat. Now we can see this, the MS sessions are such a good example of that. That's very often how it goes. From your perspective, it might be clear, like, of course, their SUD isn't going down because XYZ is still in their life, or, this happened, that happened. Most of the time, the client will have a blind spot there, just like she had with her son. I perhaps if you don't remember, I'll just remind you, there was this whole saga around her being sued. And then when I was trying to narrow down and get to the actual traumatic event, um, she felt betrayed by her son, who lied at school. Yes, he was manipulated by her ex-husband, but still. And the great thing was, and perhaps why she had difficulty seeing it, was that it didn't happen because his intentions were bad. It was, he's a child, but the truth was he was easily manipulated. She even gave an example of, unlike her daughter, nobody could manipulate the daughter, but the son was more vulnerable to being influenced by the other parent. So we named that, and often you see that so much release comes just from that, the naming. And then, of course, you put a strategy around that, but the release comes from, of course, it's this. That's what you want to see. That's how you know that the naming did the trick. When there's relief, there's clarity. And finally, of course, we also see this with the Tame the Critic recipe. Again, the reason why I want to get so specific, even with Marcus, what is that inner critic telling you? It goes back to the power of naming things, naming their emotional reality. Always, if things are done right, it always leads to clarity and relief. So hopefully that all makes sense to you. I'll just let Mary Elizabeth in, and if you have any questions or sharing, I would love to hear them. Just put your hand up if you can. It just makes life easier for me. I see Janina. You can unmute yourself if you can, Janina, and then Leah.
Yes.
Right.
Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. Great to see you again. Two things. The first one about the emotional release. There's something that she's not here today, but when I had a few sessions with Kathy, what she did at some point, which I just think is for me in that moment, it was brilliant, because for me, it sometimes can be hard to really feel my emotions fully. I mean, I can feel them very deeply when I'm by myself, but it can sometimes be challenging when I'm with someone else, which she probably picked up. So at some point, what she asked me to do is like what does this anger want to say? Or what did it want to say? And she made me like communicate, and then I was still very hesitant, and then she was like speaking in a way that shows anger, and then I could do that, and for some reason that just opened it up for me, and I could really access the emotions in much more depth. And I feel that was one of the most powerful emotional release recipes I ever did. So having experienced
Can I ask a little bit more questions just so we're clear? So when you say it's more difficult for you to feel your emotions in somebody else's presence, what do you actually mean? That you feel in your body something but cannot put a name on it, or you feel numb?
I feel a remnant, like I feel like 10% of the emotion. I can feel, okay, there is some disgust, there is some anger, there is some shame, but I know, and in the same time, I know I'm just feeling that portion of how much it actually is.
Okay. So you know you're feeling it, you know what it is, but you're not letting the full intensity.
Exactly.
Okay, I understand.
Exactly.
Okay. And in
So
this situation, to allow yourself to feel the full intensity, what was helpful was sort of asking, what would that anger say, or what would that anger have you say?
yes, I think she said something around the lines, okay, so I think it was when we reached the anger, and she was around the lines of, okay, so what is it that the anger wants to say? Let it speak through you. And I was still quite of holding back, but it was very genuine what I felt and what I said. So she repeated it a few times with a kind of like angry voice. And then I could do the same, and it just went like through me, and it was super powerful for me. That was and seeing her, because I need that. It's, I guess, vulnerability. being completely 100% vulnerable, showing my emotions so intensely. So when I saw her, she's doing that, it kind of like allowed me to do it myself. So I think because it happened to me too with some clients, that at some point I could sense that, okay, they know there's anger, but they're still holding back. So obviously it has to be the right timing to not be pushy or anything. But for two of my clients, it has been really helpful when I said, okay, let this anger speak through you, let it move through you. What does it want to say? And or this shame or this sadness. So I think that can be a great additional help for people who are like that. So
Let
yeah.
me just comment on that before you go on.
Mhm.
So yes, I agree with you 100%. And the main principle behind the emotional release recipe is that we want to put a little bit of a distance between the client and the emotion. And I actually remember that when I was training in a different modality, they had people name what they were feeling as an adjective. So say anxious, and it wasn't very helpful because it was like they were affirming that's what they are. You know, if you say anxious, you kind of look for that anxiety in yourself and identify with it. So the noun and the pointing to that is kind of make it separate from you. It's this anxiety. It's a little thing that lives somewhere in your body temporarily, but it's not you. So what you're saying is just taking it to another level. And if that happens, yes, you're correct. You can even say something like, imagine that anger being completely separate from you,
Mhm.
like a separate person. And if it were to speak, what would that anger say? So that's just magnifying that distance that we're already trying to create with this anxiety, this sadness.
Mhm.
Wonderful.
And in one way, it's another way again of naming, because you name, you verbalize what's behind this emotion, and how it feels and what it thought in the moment, or what you thought in the moment when this emotion came up. So yeah, I found it really,
And
really
just
great.
just out of curiosity, let's imagine this. So if you're doing the emotional release with the practitioner, and let's say you are aware that there is some anger, and it's kind of sleeping still, it's at a 2 out of 100. um what would it do to you if the practitioner gave you the feedback of, I actually see your jaw clenching, your eyes narrowing, I see tension around your eyes, it looks like anger? What would that do with that anger that is sleeping?
And I can see two possibilities. I can see that for some, it might be oh, I don't want to be seen as angry, so I push it away again.
Yeah.
Maybe some other people would be like, oh yeah, right, okay, let's allow it. But I can imagine that many people would, because we don't want to be seen as angry. That's kind of like how we're conditioned, many of us.
Yeah.
And that we would immediately like, oh, no, I'm not angry, actually, I'm okay.
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
you know.
Absolutely. So back to that agreeableness that we opened last year. Yes, somebody who is very agreeable, anger is the worst thing. And that's why it's also good to have up in your sleeve some words that make it easier for somebody who's not that comfortable experiencing anger, to make it easier for them. So such as, like I do with Jeannie, you can be ladylike if you'd like, and we could do this. It will take us longer, but eventually, we will get there. If it's fury that you're feeling, it's fine too. So absolutely. And for you, what worked was, okay, let's imagine it's somebody different, that anchor, and we let it speak.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Wonderful.
One quick question about the a basic recipe. With one of my clients, we did it, and she lowered beautifully. So we finished the basic recipe, and then she asked me, it feels nice if I feel like this freedom now, that I feel like the memory is not here anymore, but I have the wish of actually, because it feels like not like a hole, but it feels like it was inside of my body, it's not there anymore. Can we actually do the basic recipe, but rather than releasing something, we're letting love and compassion enter. And then I kind of like spontaneously adjusted to that. So we did the 3 rounds again, and we were just having the intention of we're doing this now, so that now where the memory was before in your body, we're now inviting love and self-compassion. And she really, really loved that. So just wanted to share that, because that's she yeah, had this wish of doing that, which I think it's beautiful.
And thank you for sharing that, because it just you know, the emotional release recipe is adjusted for this precise situation. It does feel sometimes like when people let go of something that was part of them for a long time, even if that was trauma, it was part of their identity. So there can be a little bit of, what will I replace it with just now? So there's no hole. And that's why in the emotional release recipe, I say always end on a positive note. And that's precisely to tackle this very scenario that you're mentioning. So if you manage to do that through the basic recipe, it's fine. Or you could also, I think that's what I did in one of the sessions with Becky. We cleared the memory, and then I went back to the emotional release recipe, and then we worked with that compassion again. That was precisely with the intention of sort of patching that hole and replacing something else. So it's instead of that trauma. Wonderful. Thank you. Leah, I'm coming to you, and then I see Ramona's hand as well. There you go.
Happy New Year, everyone.
And your sexy COVID voice, yes.
Sexy COVID voice.
Yes.
Just kind of the residual. Otherwise, I'm on the way to recovery anyway. Let's just say that. My energy is still pretty low, but, and there's this congestion still, but nothing like it was on the weekend. The weekend was just awful. But yeah, just like a really bad cold. So lucky, both my husband and I, we had the exact same symptoms, and we believe he got it from his brother-in-law, or his brother, sorry, who he chose to go visit knowing he was sick, and nobody thought to test for COVID. Anyway, it is what it is. But so my question or observation, maybe just your take on it, is I'm wondering if when people have their event, whatever ended up happening, minimized, so which happens a lot, right? Especially with things that some people will perceive as being nothing and get over it. And if they know something happened that has obviously created a series of emotions for them, that happened, like the emotions happened in the moment, but I'm wondering if, because it was minimized or swept under the rug, or the get over it kind of attitude, if they now have difficulty being able to associate the emotions that they're feeling regarding a different situation that maybe triggers them or reminds them, and the sort of originating situation that happened, like using the example that you talked about with the girl sitting on the uncle's lap, knowing she had a feeling around it that something wasn't right, but she may have said something to her mother, and her mother said, "Oh, don't be silly, that would never happen," or whatever. So I'm wondering if it just creates this denial, really, of something that happened, but the emotions are still there.
Yes, so the emotions were clearly still there, even though she didn't remember what happened. And that's what the emotional release recipe is so great for, because for a number of reasons, you might not be always able to identify the event the way we need to have it identified for the basic recipe to work. Now, if somebody's emotional reality has been minimized or invalidated, that's just another way of dissociating. Dissociation will always cause someone to not be in full touch with their feelings, and therefore having difficulty assessing their emotional intensity towards what happened. It doesn't matter if they were invalidated or if something else happened that caused them to dissociate. With this, I will say that oftentimes what holds more emotional charge than the event itself that they were invalidated about. It's the experience of being invalidated. And that can be of a single event, or if that was a common thread, you know, it can be that gestalt memory. So what I'm getting at is that you will see a lot of progress and change if you tackle that first, that trauma of being invalidated. Sometimes what happens is that it doesn't really matter the traumatic event, it clears with the clearing of the invalidation. Or it will simply be less intense. I do find that being invalidated, minimized, and having your emotional reality denied is one of the biggest sources of trauma for everybody. Just this feeling of always, you know, am I crazy? How is my reality so different from the other person's reality? That's very tough on the psyche. So that's, if you start with that, the door will open to whatever needs to be tackled after.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's kind of what I was thinking. And it's not as important to validate the event that happened, you know what I mean? Them remembering, well, this happened, or so much as validating that whatever they felt, you know, was, I don't want to use the word right, but, you know, actually was how it was right. Like, you know, it's the only word I can come up with right now. Because I have foggy COVID brain. So word retrieval is hard, but yeah.
No worries. It just reminds me of what you shared with us one time when we were talking about the agreeableness, how you brought your baby to the doctor, and you know, they were saying it's just a rash, and it wasn't.
Right.
And you know, he invalidated you to begin with. Then you stood up for yourself, but you can understand how difficult that is for somebody, and that was just an interaction with a doctor. And I do find that specifically with the doctors and the healthcare system, a lot of this kind of trauma of being invalidated, minimized, etc., can happen. So that's something to be expected a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, with pretty much all our systems. I had a couple other events that happened right before I got hit with COVID. I lost a really good friend. He had been sick for a really long time, but it's still very difficult for us. He was only 70. And then when I was telling another friend, I contacted her to let her know. She told me that they lost their nephew over on, actually it was Christmas Eve, to murder. And it just, you know, and then I got hit with COVID. So it was like a lot for me to process, but I've been, you know, talking with both of those families back and forth. Yeah, it was, I don't know if any of you had heard about it, but it happened in Halifax, in Nova Scotia here in Canada. And he was 31 years old. Great guy, was home visiting his parents. He lives here in Ontario, and went out with his twin brother, who was his only sibling. And just, you know, to a bar Christmas Eve, as guys do, and something happened and he ended up dead, and his brother was beat up very badly. And his parents are now dealing with all of this. And so my friends, who it's his nephew, they're also, though, dealing with the frustration with the legal system because they haven't arrested someone, even though they know, you know, and so it's that authority thing again, right? And I just really feel for them. It's just, yeah, it's, I mean, aside from this COVID keeping me up at night, that's been keeping me up a lot. Just thinking about them. And, you know, just again, I think it comes back to that feeling, which is kind of related to helplessness. It's like, I want to do something. I want to make it better. I wish we could all do something to make the systems better, but there's not a lot we can do. Hands are tied, and you're just watching the suffering happening. So yeah, yeah,
Thank you for sharing that, Leah. And it's really on time because this emotional release recipe is also really good for situations like these. I mean, you've been coming to these calls, so you remember it was what 1 year ago. On top of the pandemic, even for you in Canada, you had the truck drivers on strike, and it was I could see all of you Canadians being very, very distressed by it, no matter on what side of the whole thing anyone stood. And we were encountering the same theme here a lot, in that there are realistic stressors in our lives, whether we've cleared our past trauma or not. We are still encountering the soil in which trauma thrives, which is threat and escapability. So the helplessness is just another way of an escapability. There's nothing I can do about it. So the emotional release recipe is specifically for cases like these. So whatever it is that's coming up, this helplessness in my, etc., this overwhelm, or this doom and gloom feeling, or this it's futile feeling, this futility, whatever it is, that needs to be part of our self-care in instances like this. And the goal is not to be overly optimistic, as in to ignore what is happening, but the goal is to see clearly, so we don't exaggerate the danger and don't minimize it either. So we can decide what the best course of action is with a clear head, which is difficult when we're feeling overwhelmed and hopeless. When you think of leaders, you're becoming a leader in your community, you're the leader in your family. So you want to be in that good space to know, to tell them what to do, to help them, guide them what to do in situations like these. And just so you know, this happens everywhere. I'm not going to mention catastrophes, but yeah, that's everywhere.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
I
and that's
also,
the thing is, that's what really came, and I did post that this thing about it is that the only thing I can control is my own peace within, and do what I can to keep myself in a healthier state mentally and otherwise, so that I can be the best support I can be for others, right?
exactly.
And I think that's to your point. I think, when, because obviously that I have children that exact age, my daughter is 31, like it's
Yeah.
just, yeah. So it just so then it's about releasing my own stuff around it and what it brings up for me, and then not that it fully gets cleared, but by releasing the emotional stuff, I feel like I'm better prepared when they're ready to have help, to really be able to help them effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And this brings me to some of the sessions, even in the training. And some of you, if you worked with people who have lost somebody, it could have been a parent that, who died, etc. Oftentimes, what you see after they've done GTR is it continues to be sad. They lost somebody who died, but it doesn't paralyze them. And that's the key word. They see what the reality is,
Yeah.
but that helplessness doesn't paralyze them to the point of that there's nothing I can do. Just like you said, you can keep yourself in a good state and then be ready to use the tools if somebody needs your help and support, for instance.
Right. And I think, highlighting that it's not wrong to feel whatever you're feeling. I mean, my mom's been gone 14 years, but Christmas, there were still moments, there were great moments. And there were moments where I got choked up because it was something I knew she really loved, and that's okay. And I explained that to my kids, who were like, "Oh, I'm sorry that I talked about," and I said, "Don't be sorry. No, it's that this is all part of it." But we can also, in this almost same moment, go, yes, I feel the sadness, but I also remember the joy that
Yes.
it brought her.
Yeah.
I think that's when you get to that healthier emotional space around loss.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. And you mentioned also you know, you have COVID and that's contributing to your state. And, you know, the physical mechanism behind when we're ill, often our mood is worsened and we see things more negatively. And there's a reason for that. It's because the body is trying to prevent you from taking action. It just wants you to heal and stay put. You know, just like we talked last year about the personality trait, there's extroversion, which are those emotions that make you move forward with life. And if you felt that way, you might be compelled to take action and move and actually put yourself in physical danger. So that worsened mood is there to tell you to stay put and relax and continue the healing. There's that too. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
You're most welcome. All right, I'm going to Ramona, and then there's Taryn and Lucy.
Everybody. I can share just a recent with the emotional release. So long-term client, she's been through a lot of trauma. Her dad passed away, and you know, there's a lot wrapped up in that. It wasn't a shock. He was in hospice, but nonetheless. So when we meet, she was pretty raw. And it wasn't just this one thing, but there was a shocker within that event. So as she was talking is when she went to her dad's viewing at the funeral, saw his body there and then touched him. And then the shock of touching a dead body and realizing that physical awareness. So as we were talking, we figured out that one was like a 9 or 10 out of 10 for intensity. But then we had to address the whole big picture and all of the parts that are wrapped up in this death and the loss, and even feeling guilt and so many things. So we did the emotional release first. And in this case, it was really just acknowledging the little girl who didn't want to lose that anchor of her dad. Because even though he wasn't physically and emotionally, mentally able to really prop her up in any way, it was that anchor to that little girl wanting her dad. So we did the emotional release and checked in, and that memory had gone down to a 2 out of 10 instead of a 10. So then we did the basic recipe, and I think it was just 1 round, maybe 2, to get it down to 0 with that. And she was recalling it differently, like feelings of peace as the time progressed and things like that. So just an example.
Thank you for sharing that. It's just very fascinating when people process the trauma around the grief of losing somebody close to them that they love. Oftentimes what you find is that there's really a change in how they recall the memory, and almost as if now it has parts that weren't present there before. I was just editing your second session with the client that we're adding your sessions into the training, and I don't know if you recall it. So in the second session, you address her memory of losing her mom, and her mom died suddenly. It was from one day to another. I think there was stroke or something like that. And then she was 3 days in the hospital. And one of the symptoms, actually, that's how it started. That's how you started digging into that, was that she said she wasn't able to pick up a book and read. Unless it was a nonfiction, pick up a book and read, even though she was an avid reader. That was her go-to. That was her, self-care strategy #1 until that point. And she was able to connect that to, she was reading to her mom on those couple last days when she was unconscious, reading Gone with the Wind. And then, the mom died and she couldn't pick up the book. So you go into that. You start with the basic recipe. After 3 rounds, she's at a 2 or 3, and then you go into the emotional release recipe. And it's such a great example because it demonstrates so well what so often happens, which is the not being able to say goodbye, and have closure that way. And then when she retells the memory, when you ask her, what she's remembering, how's the memory now, she says that she said goodbye then and there in that memory, even though that wasn't present before. So that's something that we see a lot when there is grief around losing someone we love. Yeah. Was wonderful. Thank you. Taryn, I'm going to you and then Lucy. Hi. Try now? Yes.
Hi, everyone. I was listening to what you're talking about with being invalidated, and it came up as you were talking, when you guys were talking about it. I'm helping one of my clients has healed from some of the invalidation, but now she's in the process of writing a letter. And I'm sharing this a little bit because I'd like to know your thoughts. I am a very I have some rules about writing letters of complaint. I do my best to not have emotion tied to it, that it is much more, has to be kind of factual. And also when you're talking, you don't talk to the person as the person being the problem. But in this emotional story with this woman, the person is a big problem. And the way that she felt was big. And so now she's able to put it in writing and she's getting ready to send it to this person. And I feel like I'm trying to make her change a few things. One in particular is don't name the person, say it was her, that's why, because she wants her money back, basically. She wants her money back. And she's written this whole diatribe about how she felt and what she was hearing and what was going on. And then she, at the very end, basically attacks the person in a way that, in my opinion, is not going to get her what she wants. But my question is, if she writes it, number one, she's probably going to be invalidated in the long run because the person's not going to respond or answer it. And should a person just get it out regardless? I'm coming from the place of, let's write it in a way that's going to get you your money back. I'm not really looking, and I'm trying to get out of the emotional space to make that happen. But I don't know if that's a bad thing in this case for this person. Do people need to let it all out? And
it's an amazing question, Taryn. And I think it speaks to why many of us sometimes felt that coaching alone isn't enough. Because we can identify the problem and we can tell them, this is what you got to do, and it's going to get you where you want to go. Just keep your eyes on the ball and go in that direction. However, that in many of our experiences has proven to be extremely difficult because the emotions are in the way. So this brings me to what the whole GTR actually is about. It's that missing piece to coaching where we know what we should do and we know what would be good and what would lead to most results. But we're not in an emotional place that is resourceful enough that we can do that. So the way we deal with that is we clear the trauma first, and then the action is easy. So I guess to answer your question, she needs to do both. But the order is important. So you first help her de-traumatize, get the trauma around that from her body with all the tools from GTRs.
Well, I did do that. We have done that. She doesn't have those feelings around it. It's her trying to get a message across to the other person.
Yes. Okay.
Right?
I see what you mean. So what do you believe is her motivation in doing that? What is she trying to get to by saying to that person who did that to her? What is she hoping that will get her?
Well, we haven't, this just happened today, which is why I don't have all the information. I just sent her a note. We're only talking via text right now, but because she's been having a lot going on. But I think she's in two places. I think number one, she wants this person to know what an ass that person is, basically. And she also wants her money back. She wants both.
Yes.
And
okay.
she has now, because she knows how she knows the feelings that she has towards this person and why and where it's coming from in her past. And she's healed all that. And that's giving her the strength to write the letter. Okay. That's giving her the strength to write the letter. But the letter is not going to get her what she wants. That I know. Yes. I know that the letter's not going to get her what she wants.
Wonderful. Okay. So she wants two things, really. She wants her money back. And I find that in contexts like this, when somebody had not the respect and awe for a teacher, and that teacher didn't end up being what they thought they would be. Oftentimes there's the desire to help other people avoid the pain that this person went through.
Mhm.
So if that's the case for your client, in that she wants the world to know, that's a different goal. And she
That's
has
not, but
to,
that, yeah, but that letter's not going to a lot of
exactly,
people's.
and she needs a
One,
different
one
means
of, one other
accomplish
thing
that.
I wanted to bring up, because I thought this was really important to me with regard to my intuition. She did not ask for the money in the letter. So that's kind of where I'm stuck, is that maybe she's just trying to get it out. Maybe the money isn't that big. I mean, I think the money's a big deal to her. And I think because she brings that up in the letter, but she never asks for it. And so
Mhm.
I think intuitively I'm saying, maybe she's just getting this out.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking, what is she trying, what does she believe that this will give her?
Mhm.
Because if it's a lost sense of respect or betrayal, or that person cannot be allowed to do this, how is this even possible? Then there are other ways to achieve that than saying that to the person. So what I'm
Right.
saying is there might be a strategy for getting her money back, which is the complaint letter that is emotionless, just factual. Why does she want her money back? And
Mhm.
then to satisfy that other part of her that perhaps even believes that it might be ethical, moral to let others know about that, then she has to achieve that through a different route, a different strategy, not the letter. So I guess what I'm getting at is you validate both of her desires, just explain that different strategies lead to one and to another, and you can do both, but not the two of
Right.
them combined. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, it does. And I told her if she wanted to talk it through, we could. And so that gives me good information to add.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're most welcome. All right, Lucy, I'm going to you, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Well, that you're bringing that up, Taryn. Hi, everybody, for starters, before I jump in. Happy New Year
Would it
to
be
everyone.
possible to lower your screen just a little bit? So yes, excellent. Thank you.
No problem at all. My apologies. I have a little bit of a cold, and it's great to be here to see everyone. And I'm glad that I'm not passing anything on, that sometimes virtual is a great thing. So Taryn, what comes to mind for me on your comment there about, what does she want, the money or the trying to, explain to this person her thoughts? And that's, do we have to have reasons when we ask for something? So if you want your money back, just say, I want my money back, because sometimes no matter how much a person were to explain something, the other person just may not agree. And so it's, I want my money back. It's like if you ask me out for lunch and I say, well, I can't go because I have this and I have that on the go. And you say, well, so you could cancel those things and you could still come with me. Whereas if I said, I won't be coming out for lunch with you, I have a commitment. And then you could say, oh, well, what is it? And I were to say, I have a commitment and I won't be coming out for lunch. So I'm sticking with my boundaries compared to thinking that I'm going to convince you that my reasoning for not going is more important than going for lunch with you. So I see that as an issue with when we ask for money. It's, I want a refund. Now they might say, well, what? Okay, if it's a product this product isn't doing what it does, I want a refund. But the explanation, if it's about an emotional scenario and she's going into something else, I agree with like what Isabella has said, and I see Ramona said, well, then it's two letters. One is about, I want my money back. Two is, this is there's something else that's bothering me. Maybe the two are connected. That's my take on when we, what's the clarity around wanting the money back? Why does she want her money back? Regardless of the other story, what's the issue about the money?
It didn't match with her values and experience, her values and what she's looking for as a coach.
Okay, so even though she knows that that's her reasoning for wanting her money back, she could be asking for her money back without having to explain any of that, because the other person could say, well, I think it gives you lots of value and you should be happy with it, blah, blah.
She has specific factual things that changed her opinion in what she was doing.
Sure. And then there's the whole, what's the refund policy? Like just looking at the pragmatic aspect of, if a person's running a business, any of us, anything you go to buy somewhere, what's your refund policy? Do you make exceptions is one thing, but it's if it says you have a refund within 30 days, no questions asked, then there's no explanation necessary.
And just a little note there, Ramona is saying that there might be two letters. I would have normally said yes, there might be, kind of like when I'm working with Marcus, at one point, I'm asking him to write the utopia of what he's thinking is going to happen and the reality. And normally that might be a strategy, like write the therapeutic letter, let it all out, and then write this letter of complaint. However, my sense with this client is that there's almost a rage and fury going on. And I'm not sure if a therapeutic letter is going to do that. It might be that there's some finish and complete that might be wonderful for that, where she can, whatever she wants to put in that complaint and tell that person what she thinks of them. You might achieve that through finish and complete with her. Yeah.
It's a tough one.
It is.
Me personally, I'd get my way.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any other questions you have around this client, Taryn?
No, you guys gave me a lot of good information. I think for me personally, one of the things that I've learned through GTR is allowing the person to find the answers. And when I took empowerment coaching, I took it because I liked the idea that I could say something and tell you something and help you see things in a different way. And the combination of the two is working for me. But when it comes to things specific to finding a solution, I struggle with when to and when not to. And so that's why I asked the question. It was more not so much, I mean, yes, about her and because I know I'm going to be coaching her again, but how to help her see it without me having to say it necessarily, or is this a situation where I should say it, where I should say, if this is what you want, if what you want is to get money back, this isn't going to get it. That's, for me, that's the empowerment side. But the emotional side, you did this and you did this and you did this and she did this and this happened here and this happened here, all that emotion stuff, I can't tell her how to solve. I can help her work through and solve that, which I've done over many times. And we've gotten really, really deep with her. But when do you let the empowerment piece come in and help them through the process?
I'll say it in a very simplistic way. You go into empowerment when they're not in a place of we don't want that. That's not a resourceful state. And it might be that you cleared something, but not quite what is at the core.
Yep.
Because if you did, she wouldn't be in a place of where she wants to let that person know what she thinks of them. That's almost like that trauma piece that just wants to get out, to release the trauma.
Well, I will say that her feelings about this is what brought her to me. So
Yes.
she was extremely distressed, big time.
Yeah.
And we found out that it came from her past, something. And so what I know for sure about her is that she never felt comfortable in relationship with other women at all. She doesn't have any good friends. She doesn't have good female friends for a lot of reasons. So we cleared that. And so she became much more vocal, much more participatory with other women. And so I think there's something where she's feeling this strength and ready to tell the person off. I mean, but my place as in a business, my place in a business has always been, in fact, when somebody said, you know, I never show anger ever at work. And I never let anyone know my emotions, but I speak very well to let them know what's going on. And I think that's where she's at, and she's trying to figure out how to do it. And
Yes.
I don't know how to, I can show her my way. It's not going to work for her if she doesn't see it herself.
Yes.
So
And so we want to see that, going back to that question, what does she believe this will do for her, or what is she looking for? Because you might be right in that the refund is much less important to her than actually being able to
tell the woman off.
get some dignity back, what she feels might have lost, and tell her that might be what she needs, and it might be more important for her than the refund. So
That's what I'm wondering, because she talks about the refund, but she never asks for it.
yes.
But she's very, very vocal in how this situation made her feel.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's what I was wondering. I think that's what she really wants, but
But
Yes.
getting a refund could also be a way of telling her off.
yeah.
So it's, one isn't necessarily separate from the other in terms of the,
See?
but separate in how they could be dealt with. In
Mhm.
terms of if she wants to refund, ask for the refund based on whatever policy and so forth. If she wants to actually share her opinion, then
See-
she can do that as well. I wouldn't.
When I,
but it's
well,
one
when I
person
looked at
finding
when I looked at the letter, I said it was a great letter. She was getting all her emotions out.
Can
The
you
only
give us
thing
an example of what was in that letter, like just so we know.
that she was talking, that she came into this event, this program, to become better at this job and at what she does. And when she talked to the salesperson made all these promises and encouraged her to sign up because she could wait on, she also wanted to become an instructor in another area, a certificate. And the woman said, oh, you can always do that one, but this class is happening now, you should sign up. And so she signed up and she paid a significant amount of money. I mean, more than I've paid in any coaching class. So, and so anyway, she did that and she signed up and she took it. And so I think, so then she started in on the meetings and everything with people and conversations and coming into the calls that they had every week. And the instructor was speaking about things not relative to her values and expectations. She did not want to talk about threesomes and alcoholism. I mean, she didn't mind talking about alcoholism from how it's affecting coaching and how to help somebody in that situation. This person was talking about things as it related to this person. This person was basically talking to an audience of people about her own issues and her own experiences. And the woman, from session to session, was feeling more and more disenchanted with the process. And so what she's doing is she's telling that whole story again in very detail, and then attacking the person that was who was the instructor.
And when you say attacking, what specifically was she saying?
Gosh, I can't even be near this person. I can't even spend time on a call with this person. This person is what was the word she used? Some kind of nasty word, and should not be in this place. She said I was, her words were, I feel like I was scammed. She didn't use the word scam, but something like that with regard. What do they call it when somebody gets cheated? Gets cheated. She was, I was taken advantage of, so to speak, and blah, 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 blah. And it was, I mean, it's very well written story.
Yeah.
And I can see
yeah, again, going back to what we said, figure out what the emotional need is behind this. It might be saying it to that person, but based on what you're saying, it might be the shock of she will do this to others, just
Mhm.
as she did this to me, people who are in vulnerable positions
Mhm.
and believe that this program will help them.
Well, see,
So-
that's when you contact the Better Business Bureau and you say, look, this has got to, something's got to change. And you go to somebody that can help you with this problem where you shouldn't even have to deal with that person at all.
Yeah, but there's the aspect of she shouldn't even, or that the teacher shouldn't even be teaching, or the
Mhm.
teacher shouldn't be doing this. If that is something that is bothering her,
Mhm.
then there might be a strategy to let the world know about that.
Yeah.
So she saves other
Yeah.
vulnerable people from doing this. So figure out what she wants out of that.
Well, here's what I don't know, and that's why I'm waiting to hear back from her. I don't know if she already sent it, number one. So not knowing whether she was sending it or not sending it, I made two very small suggestions. And the first one was taking the person's name out of it and just saying this is not the right course for me because of these reasons. And I told her that it offended her sense of value, what she expects from a coaching program. And so I said, if you're going to send it before you and I talk, don't, and this is what you want, then take this one thing out. I said, but it's up to you to do what you want to do. But if you want to set up a call me, let me know when, and we can go through and talk through what you're going through. And so I did the best I could with the information that I had. I think for me, it's just a matter of when you step in and when you don't, and I felt like, do I step in or not, and really, really seriously, I'd pretend to be a lawyer and write a damn nasty letter and send it out.
Yeah, and yes, so that is your dilemma, when to step in and when you don't
Yeah.
step in. And
Yeah.
I think to make this more simple, your suggestions are not stepping in, as long as you're formulating it in a way that leaves them an exit door and doesn't make it look like that's the only option.
Mhm.
That is your job, to help them see, to help them gain perspective.
Okay.
You're not making her to do it one way or the other. You're just
Okay.
presenting another point of view and options, which if somebody is in a traumatized enough state, they are in a place where they're able to receive the options. Without that, they wouldn't be. There's only one way.
It sounded to me, it's kind of funny because the way that she sent this letter to me, it was as if she was showing me what she was doing, like a kid showing me what I was doing. Like, look at what I did, and I was like, does she want me to say good congratulations? I was like, okay.
Well, just going back to what you started with, you started when you raised your hand saying that you want to respond to the invalidation piece,
Mhm.
right? So that's what she was looking for. She wanted somebody to see what she's feeling, because oftentimes in these circles of teachers / guru, there's a lot of facade. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of the confusion and even trauma comes from the fact that one realizes that things are not what they seem to be. And it
Mhm.
looks like nobody else sees that.
Right.
So there was the validation piece that she was looking for. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, we'll hear about the next part of the saga next time. Hopefully, you'll let us know.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, ladies. So I'm looking at you. If there's anybody else that would like to share or say something, go ahead.
Actually, I had one other comment I wanted to make, say it briefly. I know Leah just, she went off the call, but around her helplessness, a personal example to tie it. I wanted to have asked Leah, did she do the emotional release recipe for herself around helplessness? And I ended up resorting to it myself last night before I went to bed, because something had come up in the holidays. And I recognized there was a theme that runs through many different events. So doing the basic recipe was not necessarily the place that I wanted to start. So I chose the emotional release recipe, and I interestingly had written down on a piece of paper the emotions I thought I was feeling. One was betrayal, anger, sadness. And then I looked at the list and asked myself, which one's like really standing out? Well, it was betrayal. Now, betrayal runs through a lot of examples in my life around money
Mm.
in my family of origin. And so there was huge money issues when my father died, and there was other people like vultures would come in and insurance companies not paying. And so there's tons of all the events. So then I thought, okay, I'll just stick with betrayal. And what's it doing to me right now? And ironically, I think I was really surprised by the example that triggered it all. Was I happened to be at a Christmas gathering, and a niece and a nephew, when we said goodbye, we hugged, and they said, oh, my mom and dad say hi. Well, I haven't spoken to their parents, my ex-brother, in 3 years. And immediately, and I never let on to my niece and nephew because I knew this wasn't about them. They were innocently saying, oh, my mom and dad say hi. Well, that would be fine if there wasn't a backstory on my behalf, but I knew it was my reaction. So last night with the betrayal piece, I asked myself, so where does this betrayal live? Well, it was in my heart, it was in my throat, it was in feeling a sense of paralysis. And I just kept rocking. And when I couldn't come up with any more areas or locations in my body, I kept rocking anyways. And then I started to do the eye movement with it without any words. I literally rocked in silence. And by the end of it, I was starting to yawn. And I could tell I was slowing down with the rocking. And there was this immense sense of peacefulness. Do I think there could be some lingering? Maybe, but in that moment, it was peacefulness. And whereas the night before I hadn't slept well, and last night was like, it was bliss to sleep.
Wow.
So I find it uncanny that today, Isabella, you mentioned then on the emotional release recipe, and how, if anything, I could say, and that's remember yourself. Remember the importance of what we are learning and how you can benefit from it yourself. And then we can show up to be able to hold whatever a client comes to us with, because we may not necessarily be as triggered or whichever. So.
See, this was amazing because we just came full circle. I wanted to talk about the emotional release recipe, obviously, because the holidays, naturally we get together with family members, and that can lead to situations like these. So that was the reason behind the topic of today. So thank you. Mary Elizabeth, your hand was up just a bit ago, and then it went down. I don't know if you wanted to say something or you changed your mind. So
I just wanted to say hi. I'm
Hi.
not capable of carrying on a conversation because I keep coughing.
Oh my goodness.
But it was
Okay.
really, yeah, I've been sick in bed for several days. Anyway, it was a great call, and I just want to say I was away with family for 2 weeks, and there's usually a lot of mind falls when I go, and it was great. I handled all the things that came my way, and it was a real testament to when you change.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, absolutely.
great.
That's what it is. That the problems and the way people behave, which is not always in the best ways, it won't just walk around us and not affect us, but we're in different place in handling those things. Thank you so much.
Yeah. One person said, well, when you say this, I feel a rage inside. He finally said, and my statement that I said was, are you thinking of putting a fire on anytime soon? I didn't say anytime. I said, are you thinking of lighting the fire tonight? Which to me seemed like a really innocent statement, but to him, it meant a whole lot of other things. And so I said, well, I'd like to understand how that makes you feel. And we talked about it, and he said, I feel like I can look you in the eyes now, that I can trust you. And I was like, wow.
Wow.
Yay, it's only taken 8 years, but we're getting there.
You came a long way. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that despite your voice being affected like that. And thank you for coming to this call. So if nobody else wants to share, I'm just going to stop here and thank you for coming, and use this opportunity to wish you a wonderful 2023. And I'll be looking forward to having a lot more of these meetings with you. Thank you, ladies. Bye-bye. Bye. I'll stop the